Good morning. My name is Inga Cotton, and this is Charter Moms Chats. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. And today we have a guest. We have Dr. Joanne Turner, who's the vice president for research at Texas Biomedical Research Center. And their purpose is to do research on infectious diseases, which means that they are very well placed to quickly pivot to doing research on COVID-19. And this is very timely right now. I think a lot of us have questions about what's up with coronavirus, what are scientists doing to learn more about it, and also what can we do to keep our families safe. So while the video is going on, I have access to a little bar at the bottom where you can post a comment and you can ask a question during the live stream. And Dr. Turner is here to, as best she can. Her expertise is research on infectious diseases. She has a PhD. There may be questions about, businesses or schools or things reopening that are just outside of her area of expertise. So I just kind of want to, just like focus here is on science and facts and research. So that's what, but welcome, Dr. Turner. Is there anything else about your bio that you want to, I guess your specialty actually is tuberculosis research, right?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. This is really great to be here. I am an immunologist, and so typically I would be working on developing vaccines and understanding infections and how we can develop vaccines. And I also, in parallel to that, study aging. So I understand how our immune system changes as we grow older. So that's my general science background. I run an active lab right now, and then I also help run Texas Biomedical Research Institute. And then I have another hat, which is I'm the executive director of the Vaccine Development Center in San Antonio, which really helps kind of really educate people about vaccines in the city, particularly around the scientific discoveries.
Right. Okay. Wow. So can you tell us more about what Texas Biomed is doing specifically related to COVID-19? Right. So like you already had doing, research with animal models and things like that. So you're in a good position to adapt quickly. So what projects are you working on right now?
Yeah, so we obviously we have a lot of virologists on our campus who study other viruses. We weren't working on SARS coronavirus 2 at the time of pandemic, but we did have virologists with wonderful expertise studying Ebola, studying Zika, and so on. And so they have really pivoted their research, become experts on this new virus. One of the first things that we had to do, along with many other people around the world, is find a model to work in. And so this is a brand new virus. We know so little about it, and we needed to find a way to study it that wasn't necessarily studying it in humans, but in a way that we could manipulate the system and then maybe test vaccines and drugs. So we're fortunate to have a primate center on our campus. They really are the gold standard for studying vaccines. And so we started with some studies trying to look for the best model. And again, we're not alone in this. Lots of people are looking for the right model because we had no idea which one we could use to even test a vaccine if somebody had developed one. We tested 3 different species of monkey and 2 different ages, because we know age is really a correlate for worsening outcome. And then I think we've defined the models of how we can best use them to test vaccines or therapies. And that's the next step for us. And so now we're using those models to test new vaccines and therapeutics in this race to get one that works really well. And, we have competitors, but really whoever gets there first, we're really excited about that for them. We need those in place. And then the other part we're doing in parallel is, we're all scientists and we're academicians and we love asking difficult questions and working through problems. So we are doing basic research as well. So now we have those models in place. We're turning to basic questions about research. How is this virus infecting us? What happens when it's in our bodies? What's our immune system doing? Is age a factor? Is diabetes, heart disease a factor? And so now we're becoming researchers again, but that first rush was really, let's get a model and let's start testing what other people have developed already.
Right. And that's an important part of science, is that be able to replicate results that other labs get, right? I mean, that's part of what makes, scientific research more reliable, is can you reproduce the results and get the same.
Exactly. And there's a lot of new stuff out there. And so science is evolving too. And it used to be that you'd do your research and then go to a journal to publish, a scientific journal, which often the public don't have access to. And it's peer reviewed. So other scientists review it and say, yes, this is robust science. You've done your replicates. You've not just seen one observation and said that's so. You've really proven it. And now a lot of people post earlier online in sites that are pre-peer review. And so we're seeing a lot of new things coming out, and some of those are outstanding pieces of work, and they will end up in really credible journals. And some of them are just a bit preliminary, and so that's what sometimes the media is hold of. And then talking, obviously the anti-malarial drugs were one of them, which now I think have been proven not to work. But that was really because something came out too early. So as a scientist, I hate seeing it come out early because we can mislead. We have to prove it over and over again that it's really true. And then we know that it's something we should send out to the public.
Right, right. And part of it, like everyone wants to have a vaccine to keep people safe so that you don't have to get COVID-19, but you need to know that the vaccines are effective and they're safe for people to take, right? And then it takes the testing, right? And that's where like the animal models are really important because you know, you can once you know that an animal can get the model can get the infection, then you can show a vaccine that's preventing it, right? And you can show that the models are making it through okay, right? That they're not having bad side effects from it.
Yeah,
right?
we all want a vaccine. I mean, every scientist wants a vaccine, but we also keep talking about caution about doing that too.
Right.
There are great vaccines coming through the pipeline. I think they're accelerating that pipeline pretty well and running things in parallel. So they're running animal studies in parallel with some safety studies in humans, which will condense down that time frame because it really is urgent. But we also have to make sure we haven't developed something that makes it worse. And so it's very easy for us to test and say, well, it looks like it works. But then to put it out in the human population where we're all genetically different, we haven't maybe controlled for some of those factors. And we want to make sure we're not vaccinating with something that makes people worse. We want that vaccine to work really well and make them better. So we'd probably err on the side of caution and have one that's good, but not 100% at this point, just to get something out that we know is safe. And then the real hard work begins, right? We'll do years of research to find a vaccine that's better. That's typically what happens with vaccines. You get one, it's good, and then you get another coming out that we switch it over because it's much better, because it's based on foundational, fundamental research.
Right, right. And that's right, like the basic research helping you understand how the virus actually affects the body.
Yeah,
right?
We need to know what it does, what it looks like, and how the whole course of infection works. And we hear a lot of anecdotal stuff, which is really from people and really people at the front lines in the hospitals. They're telling us new symptoms that maybe we wouldn't have predicted. And now we have to model those symptoms because we need to put that into kind of the knowledge base we have to develop a good vaccine.
Right, right. And that are there any like more specific things you can talk about the research at Texas Biomed? Or I know it's preliminary, so there may not be, but I guess you're talking about like age as a factor, like for the models, you're working with them at different ages.
Yeah, it's actually fortuitous timing because we're about to put our observations out and publish them, and we're going to submit them for publication hopefully this week. So we did species, and of those 3 species, they had different susceptibilities. So we're able to look at a spectrum of illness in those animals. And age is a moderate factor for us, but we also selected older animals that are quite healthy. And I think we all know as we grow older, we have lots of other conditions. We might have heart disease, diabetes, prediabetes, or even arthritis or something that gives us more inflammation, kind of. Right. And all of those can make us more susceptible. So our animal models were very healthy animals because that's how we like to maintain our colony. Yeah. So they may not model everything about human disease. So we know from human studies that age is definitely a factor. We haven't replicate that as clearly in animals, but I think the next batch of studies would do that. We'll start selecting animals that maybe were older or were starting to be a little, had some health problems, and we would look at those.
Yeah, yeah, wow, that's amazing. Well, is there advice, I guess, because you're a specialist in infectious disease and so many of your colleagues are, I guess, can you, from a scientific perspective, kind of distill down like what parents, what families need to know about like keeping our kids safe? Because I think there's a lot of stuff in the media and, sometimes it gets overwhelming or confusing, but sort of like based on what now, like from the scientific perspective, like what are the things that we can do to be staying safe?
Yeah. I always like to start with defining what we call this virus, right? Because it's new. And so SARS-CoV-2 is the virus, right? SARS is a severe acute respiratory syndrome. So we had SARS-1 about 10 years ago, and SARS-2, and that's the virus. And then a lot of us talk about COVID-19. which is the disease. And so we can all become infected with the virus, and some of us will develop the disease, and it's 19 because it was discovered in 2019. It's not the 19th version of the virus. That's always important. So I'll often interchange those two. So SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease that puts somebody in hospital, really. And so the virus is new to us. We're learning very quickly what it can do. It's definitely very good at transmitting to others. So it's very active at spreading. And it does that unlike many other infections because we can actually spread it before we become symptomatic with any infection. And that's what's making it difficult for us to control. So some viruses, you get the cold, you start having symptoms, everyone leaves you alone, right? And you tend to keep yourself indoors because you
stay home, you
don't spread it. But this one, maybe for up to 2 weeks, we can spread it to others without realizing. So that gives us a challenge that we have to deal with. We know it's coming out from droplets. And that's why you'll see people wearing masks. And wearing a mask is really about protecting others, right? This altruism. It's good for us too, because we stop inhaling some things. But to be honest, we're really protecting the people around us. And we also know that it can live on surfaces for anywhere between minutes to hours, right? That's something that we're still trying to determine, and it depends on the surface. And so to keep us safe, really what we need to do is make sure we're not in crowds of people we don't know very well and in close proximity. So the longer you're standing next to someone, and it's really not a nice thought, right? We're inhaling what they're exhaling. Right, the more you do that with somebody, the more chance you're going to actually encounter that virus if they're infectious. So open spaces are great. Being outdoors are much safer. Being 6 to 10 feet away from individuals means that can't actually reach you. And so those are really good ways to protect ourselves. Wearing a mask is great for preventing large population transmission. Right? That's really good for us. Hand washing is incredibly important. And touching our face, so we never realize how often we do this. The virus can spread from our hand and anywhere there's a mucous membrane, right? Our eyes, our mouth, our nose. All of those are ways that we can actually catch that virus. And so they're actually very simple ways to protect yourself. Wash your hands a lot, don't touch your face, wear a mask if you can, and then really just try and spread out further from individuals. So no, unless it's somebody you know really well, you live in the same house with, then be careful who you're interacting with because you don't really know what they're doing to keep themselves safe. So be around the people you know are working just like you to keep yourself safe.
Right. So we have a question from a listener. She says, and again, it may be hard to answer because there's what scientists know, and then there's what's happening out in the real world. So, but Kim is asking, how cautious should people be about going out? And she specifically mentioned theme parks, church, and restaurants. Now, those sound like they might involve being indoors. And from what you said, there's more of a risk when you're indoors versus when you're outdoors, right?
And it does vary. I think the most important thing is knowing how that place is keeping you safe. So I think many of the theme parks that are opening up have got new cleaning protocols. They're telling everybody about them. They're asking people to wear masks. They've been really diligent. So knowing where you're going is important and what the safety mechanisms they have in place. I think places such as church, I think people feel the need to be part of a community. And so they're missing that social connection. And so I understand why they would go to a church. But if it's indoors, obviously, you've got more chance of really interacting and being around people you don't know. If there's singing in a choir, singing will project in a different way than speaking. And so that's increasing risk. But it's about doing your homework up front and saying, well, is this theme park or church practicing social distancing? Do they have hand sanitizer? Are they asking for masks? And then, they're really taking it very seriously. And I think restaurants are the toughest group, right? They need us to go and eat for their business. We're used to all sitting close together and interacting. Eating outdoors is great. Eating inside, as long as they've got all their protective mechanisms in place, it's fine. So it's do your homework on where you want to go first, I think is important.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question, but this one I think is impossible to answer. So Becca's asking, what will schools like in August 2020? And
yeah, that's a tough one. And a lot of it's going to depend on what happens in the next couple of weeks. And so we have really loosened the restrictions in the state and actually nationally. I think if you're news, you keep seeing these examples of crowds and crowds of people together on beaches and pools and everywhere. And so that's going to help us understand what happens. So if we come out of this Memorial Day socializing with a small increase in cases, then potentially it's going to be safer, right? If we suddenly see a huge spike in numbers, then we know that actually we need to go back to being more cautious. We need to social distance. We need to be indoors again. So I think the next 2 weeks are going to help us understand. We really are watching that very closely. A big spike in numbers means the virus is still around and still as infectious as ever and being transmitted at the same kind of increased rate when we're together. If we don't see that spike, then it's telling us that there's something new to think about because people were together, but a lot less transmission. And
Right.
that's going to be the key.
Yeah, yeah. In our own family, we've been debating about like our neighborhood pool is going to reopen on Saturday this weekend, and I was looking at the rules, and honestly I just haven't made up my mind yet. Like I'm still studying. Like it's like on the one hand it's outdoors. There's chlorine. They're limiting how many people can enter during. They have certain time slots. They're cleaning between shifts. But I may just feel safer at home. Or I've been going to the Greenway trails a lot with my kids, and that's where it's us in a group, but we're spread out from the other groups, the other families. And
outdoor
maybe I feel safer that way.
Right. Getting outside, it's really hard for a family to be indoors for all that time. And some of us are fortunate to have backyards and the ability to get out, and others are not. So I think it's important to think about mental health as well and making sure everybody's happy because it's very hard to be isolated. But yeah, it's hard when you get in a crowd, unless you really know the group that you're with, because you just need one person who's infectious and maybe it doesn't even know it. And that spreads. Now, a pool is full of chlorine, so that's something that's a very good protection against a lot of infections, which is why we have chlorine in the pool anyway. So that may be safer, but again, it's hard to know who you're around.
Yeah, and there's still like door handles and things on the way in and out of the pool, right? And although they said bring your own chair, bring your own beach towel, they're putting all the chairs away.
And even if they're cleaning them, I think all of us feel a little bit better. I think everyone's got a different comfort zone, right? I mean, I haven't really been out of my house much since this happened. I'm a scientist. I'm understanding the virus. I'm not going out and seeing a lot of people. Others feel more comfortable about it, especially if they're in groups that they know their friends are doing the right thing as well. And then, there's a little bit more safe behavior if you're around people that have social distanced and then really being safe.
Right. I think one thing that I've been curious about is like, what are things that I can do to make sure that my kid's immune system is as strong as possible? So I guess I've been having them try vegetables that they weren't sure about, right? Like zucchini, asparagus. They're still on the fence about those, but but like, what are some things that we can do to make sure like our kids are as healthy and we're as healthy as possible, so that if we do get exposed,
well, I understand.
Either fight it off, or,
I'm a vegetarian. I'm still on the fence about zucchini. I think it's really about happiness is important, healthiness is important. And so if you can have your children eat healthier, I think that's wonderful. I think that's a huge challenge you're asking a parent to do, if that's normal for your child. And so really it's more about just general hygiene, I think, in your household when you're sending your child out. So we'd love to send kids out with, carrots, celery, all the healthy things that give them all the vitamins and minerals that they need. And that's not always possible. I think that, they're well fed, they're loved and taken care of is really important, that they understand why they have to wash their hands would be important. And so I think helping them understand what's keeping them safe, why they have to ask. I mean, this is going to be a really interesting generation that's growing up that's seen a really different childhood than we would have done, right? They're thinking about distancing from people. And so really paying attention to their needs for that human contact as well. When they come home, I mean, certainly they maybe haven't been around touching people in the same way, right? It sounds strange. Right. They're used to picking up things that they share and interacting as a crowd, and maybe they're not doing that so much. And that's really hard, I think, for a kid to understand how to cope with that.
Yeah, for my son, at first we would give him the disposable mask to wear, but he's very sensitive to like fabrics and how things feel on his skin. And then finally I got some fabric and it has the Minecraft characters on it. He loves Minecraft. And so the homemade mask, he was much more comfortable wearing. So it was a matter of kind of like trial and error, finding explaining to him why, why he needs to, because we have we still interact with the older relatives in the family, and they're very careful about social distancing, and we try to be careful too, so that we're not the ones who bring it to them. But like you said, for mental health, like it's really important for my kids to still have strong relationships with their grandparents, and it really lowers their stress and helps them have a more positive outlook on life. So.
Yeah, so making it fun, having masks. I think it's lovely seeing people with all these lovely patterns on their masks. It makes kids, getting them to sing songs while they're washing their hands. I personally sing one of the themes from Jaws because I'm from that generation. Remembers that? So it made me wash my hands for longer. Anything that works, that makes it interesting to be safe and fun, and that they understand as much as you can explain that to them. And then another challenge is that everything's in the media, and everything's shocking in the media, and I think that's hard for children to watch. And so being really mindful about giving them the real facts, going to the right websites to get the information that's accurate, and not necessarily seeing some of the conversations that happen in the media that maybe aren't accurate, but also can be a little bit frightening.
Right. Actually, that was something your colleague Lisa shared me, and I'll add it to the description of the video, that there was an ebook, right, that Texas Biomed created, and it's geared to help young children understand, and so it's scientifically based. So I'll include that in the description for the video as we share it. So because then that's something constructive, so because kids they hear the adults talking, they get worried, they want to ask, you want to give them accurate information, and I think that the ebook is a really great resource for that. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I see another question. Oh, April has a question. It's a long one. Oh, asymptomatic transmission. Yeah, that is a really good question. Oh, and people keep comparing it to the flu. Yeah. That is good questions, April.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer those in reverse order.
Okay.
But I'll definitely get back to the first part. So there's a lot of comparisons with the flu, and people also compare to the common cold because of the name coronavirus. It's a really big family of viruses. This is not the same as them. I think when this first came about, a lot of people said it seems just like the flu, and that's where that's happened, right? From very early on, we said it's just like the flu. Some people get sick, and that's it. But then we realized that there's this increased transmission, and so it spread really, really quickly. And normally when you get flu, you feel really sick and you stay home and you can't spread it to people. And when you have SARS coronavirus 2, you feel fine for a very long time and you're spreading it to a lot of people. So this virus transmits much more than the flu would, and it's also probably more virulent, meaning it's more deadly, right? So more people get sick and can die from it. The other difference is we have a vaccine for the flu. And so I think way back pre-vaccine, I remember having flu when I was younger, and it was really debilitating. And now we don't really experience that anymore because we have a vaccine that we take every year, or we hope that everyone takes every year, and to prevent it. And we don't have that with this virus. So we have no defense mechanisms. We're back to old-fashioned defense mechanisms, which is not talking to people, washing our hands, old school that we used to do. We've all got a little bit complacent because we have vaccines in place. We've also forgotten what it feels like to have those infections, including measles, chickenpox. We don't see them anymore in the same way, and so that fear of them. And then we start wondering whether the vaccines are needed, and they are needed because we don't want to go back to before. So this is a really good wake up, I think, of what it could be like pre-vaccine, and then we'll get a vaccine for that. About understanding that asymptomatic transmission, it is hard, but it's not. This is not the only virus that does that, right? So as parents, right, your kids will be exposed to chickenpox, measles, and so on. Those viruses transmit before you see symptoms. Your child, which is typically the age group that get measles and chickenpox, will actually be able to spread both of those before they get the marks on their skin. And so this is exactly the same as that. And as we all understand those, right? We're like, okay, we know that I might spread it before they actually have bumps on their skin. It's the same. It's living in our lungs, and it's actually just quite happily living there and dividing. And every time we breathe, some comes out and spreads to another person. And taking that period of time for our bodies to recognize that they have an infection. And then our immune system has taken a little bit longer to really respond well and to start to tell us that we have a virus. And when we know that we're infected, because our immune cells have detected it, they switch on all these lovely responses that make us
like
feel
the fever, right, and the coughing, and right,
they give us cough, fever. We might lose some weight. We might lose appetite. All of those symptoms are really good indicators for us that we're sick. But this virus is there before those happen, and that means that our immune system, if it either hasn't seen it or when it's seen it, it's not responding in the right way. And that's why we're still able to spread it. But I would say fever and all of those symptoms we have are good warning signs for us. But right now we're spreading before we have those warning signs.
Right, right. And that's where the mask wearing is important because, right, if
absolutely, yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. So
right,
by wearing that mask, even if we were infected, we won't be able to transmit it to another person easily, unless we did lots of touching, right, and sharing. So I think a handshake may go away for a while and not become a greeting in the future, which isn't happen.
Right, just do like the elbow, right?
Yeah, anything else, but the handshaking is a really good way to transmit.
Yeah. I know I've been, well, there was when my kids got old enough to, like, I would keep telling them, like, okay, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, and then go eat lunch at school. And once that habit got ingrained in them, they got sick much less often. And actually this year, so I have a 4th grader and a 7th grader, they had perfect attendance before the schools closed for, but it's because as a family, like we really, it was like, they're very committed to their school. They don't want to miss class. And so it's like, well, guys, you just really, really have to wash your hands. And it made such a difference. Like once we built that habit in them, and like the school, really, they make sure they always had soap in the bathrooms and paper towels and, and they had enough time to go. But with kids, it takes time to build those habits. And I think that's, and for very young children, it can just be hard to remember.
Too. It's surprising how many people have been way better about washing their hands as grown-ups. And so there's something really good that will come out of this. I think the incidence of many infections will have reduced, partly because we're not interacting so much, but also because we're practicing much better hand hygiene. And so that's a great habit for us to get into. And the time it takes to wash your hands isn't a quick, just in the water and out, right? It's got to be diligent and time.
Right, you gotta get all the spots, get all,
exactly.
all the little spots.
Yeah, that's great for public health, right? I mean, that's a great way to spread all these other infections. And so I think we will see a decrease in a lot of other communicable diseases. But what we're seeing in parallel is that our parents aren't going out and vaccinating their kids. And so they're also susceptible. So we need, once people can go out, to go back to their doctors and get their vaccines so that they're up to date with their vaccines.
Yeah, that's one of the few things we've added back in our lives. I've taken my kids to the orthodontist. I'm going to the dentist. I went to the doctor for my annual exam, because, you need those screenings, to make sure that you stay healthy. And you can't put that stuff off forever. So once I felt like the crisis was over and the doctors, the office had a chance to, institute good procedures and like nobody's hanging out in the waiting room, then it's like, okay, it's, we need to take care of our health so that we're in good shape. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a side effect. So once this is really calmed down, people will go back to their physicians and get healthcare, but also a lot of people are staying indoors, not exercising so much, maybe eating more than they would because they're watching a lot of Netflix. And there's going to be all these other associated diseases with lack of kind of being fit and healthy that we're going to see come up. And so there will be downstream consequences to this for health for a lot of individuals, which is why it's so important that even if you're locked in your house, that you're trying to exercise and eat healthy and stay mentally healthy as well.
Mm-hmm. I'll add, we had one of our team members wrote a blog post about things you can do indoors for exercise with your kids. And I think that will be a post that'll be popular for a long time, like on rainy days, but like, what are good YouTube channels for kids yoga or like dance breaks or things like that, these are just habits we need to build into our lives that, we're, if it's not actually this ties in with a question a reader, Jennifer is wondering, is there a high risk of spreading at gyms, dance studios? I think for health, like, we want to get back in our good habits of going to gyms, but, gyms can be, there's a risk there because it's indoors and, people are sweating and breathing and touching the equipment. So.
Yeah, exactly. And they were one of the groups that got shut specifically for that reason, because they may have thought they would be higher risk. You've got people breathing heavier. And obviously a lot of them shared equipment that not everybody's really good about cleaning before when they're finished with them. So hopefully now everyone's practicing that. I think they're open again now because the benefits of exercise are so important. And as long as they're spacing out individuals in the gym, I think it's good for people to go back and exercise. I think, again, you have to be very mindful about your own health. So we can control how we're interacting with others. We can't necessarily control how other people are behaving. And you may encounter people that aren't wearing a mask or doing the right thing. And so be really good about your own health, right? Wear a mask when you can, which is very hard to do when you're exercising. Wipe down all your use, maybe wipe it before you get on it as well as when you get off it, just to be really sure. And hopefully don't have lots of people all in a room together. I mean, as soon as you've got that, singing and, inhaling, exhaling because you're tired, those ones it's going to spread a little easier. But you can also be very mindful about how you're interacting with others and really doing that for yourself.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of things have reopened over Memorial Day weekend, and people were experiencing summer. It's the first weekend of summer. Then in 2 weeks from now, right, we'll see the impact on how many cases of, right, like is there a consequence from the behaviors that people chose to do over Memorial Day weekend? So.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a public health concern that we're going to see a spike in cases. As a scientist, obviously, who does research, it's actually quite an interesting experiment because we will see what the consequences of this was, and it'll help us understand more about how much infection is out there in the population. So we are looking for many reasons, but we'll understand more about transmission and incidence in the community and whether other factors such as, Texas is super hot, the spike in temperature has been good or not. When you look at other countries that have already been through their peak, some of them have opened up quite a lot and some have had an increase in cases and some have not. And so we want to look locally about how that impacts us.
Right. I think one thing I asked you about before we went on the air was about like people like at their workplaces, right? And so I guess like at Texas Biomed, like you said, you've been able to work from home, like your colleagues who have children have been able to work from home. How is that working? Like at your office, like people, I guess, but then the models, like they still need to be fed and played with and things like that, right?
So it's worked quite well. We do have about a third of our staff on campus. So we're 350 employees. So we have just over 100 people on campus every single day. And some of those are taking care of our animals because that work does not stop ever. We have rodents and primates on our campus. And some of them are doing experiments. A large number of those individuals were doing the coronavirus experiments to try and find the models. And so we needed them to come in, even though there was increased risk to come to work. It was important public service, right, to go and find the right models so we can do that research. Everyone else who was not essential to be on our campus, we sent them home. A lot had laptops and it was easy. Some, we moved their desktops home. IT were obviously overwhelmed for a week or so and we chose to do that. And then everybody's been working via online kind of mechanisms such as this. And it's worked really, really well. Once people learn the etiquette of how to do this, when to speak, what to have a noise in the background, things like that, it ended up being quite an efficient way to work. And so we still have staff that I think as we come back slowly, some will stay off for a very long time. We're not in such a hurry to get them back because it's not critical that they're on our campus to do their job. So we may as well work at home and wait and see what happens in the community before we bring individuals back. Now, we did have scientists back that work on other infections, malaria, HIV, Zika, and so on. We felt like that was important that they had access to the labs again, and we didn't lock them out. Research has to go on. The global infections are still here. We have individuals who work on heart disease and diabetes. These aren't going away. If anything, they might increase because everyone's been shut down. And so we needed people back in labs. We needed the research to go on. It's important that we keep making discoveries, and it's important our scientists also do science because that's really how they keep their research programs running, is doing experiments, getting data, and publishing. And so by having them off campus was really detrimental to their own careers. So they came back. They came back safely. They stagger the work days. They stagger the days they come in or the hours. They make sure they're distant. We've got extra hygiene and wiping of everything on campus so they can be safe. And so we increased the small number. And then we're waiting for a couple more weeks to see whether we bring anyone else back or not.
Yeah, yeah, and you said some of your colleagues are taking care of their children at home, so it's right.
Yeah,
They've been doing.
I feel for them.
Yeah,
It's very, very
yeah.
hard to do a full-time job at home when you also have children in the house, and so we're being very mindful of that. We have
Yeah.
place that allow our parents to work from home, or if they're caring for an elder and need to be off, even if they're healthy. So we're trying to take care of our employees. We've been really proud of the fact that our employees are all paid and full-time employees and working full jobs. And yet everybody's working unusual hours to get it done. If they've got children, maybe they're not working a typical 9-to-5 day, but the work is done. And it's fun when you're Zooming with colleagues and you can hear their kids in the background. And they're doing. I don't have children personally, and so I'm thinking, how are they getting their job done? I mean, I'm struggling some days to be in isolation, getting my job done, and I'm like, this is a whole other job on top of a job. So we're appreciating that they're getting work done even in these difficult times, and understanding that it's very challenging for them.
Yeah, yeah. We have one more question, from a reader. She's wondering about the syndrome that's occurring in children and any data about who's more susceptible. Now, I guess your research is more focused on older folks, right? But this question is about younger folks. I think there's a lot we don't know yet, right?
A tremendous amount we don't know. So this is fairly new, and again, a new virus, new symptoms. I think there's a lot of unknowns. We hear a lot of anecdotal information from our clinicians who are on the front line really with this. It does appear that some children are more susceptible to they're getting infected with very little symptoms, but then they're developing this syndrome afterwards, which is very inflammatory. And really what's happening is their body is just overreacting to something. I don't think we know what it is. It could be the virus still. It could be that they're reacting to kind of residual infection or a byproduct of our immune response. And so the answer is we don't know yet. And it's very hard for us then to understand the disease. We do need to do research on that, but there's not enough time, right? I mean, children are sick and in hospitals now. So we rely on our frontline doctors working through this. There are similarities with other diseases that our physicians know. And so a lot of the treatments will be based on what they know. Kawasaki's is one example. It's similar to Kawasaki's. And we've had research on Kawasaki's on our campus before using rodent models or mouse models to understand that disease. I think there's a lot we need to do still. The key then, I think, we thought early on that children would be really safe because they don't have symptoms. And now we're learning that maybe if they had encountered the virus, they can still get sick. And so that's important information to know as a parent, because you think about where you want your children to be in case that they may develop something later. And so I think initially we thought this is going to be great. Children don't get it, or they don't get it very badly. And it's still only a subset that are getting sick. But if that's your child, that's really, really important subset.
Yeah. That's very serious. Yeah. I think, part of the challenge, like you've talked about how there's a lot of research going on. Things are getting shared, but sometimes they're getting shared early. Sometimes the media will take something and kind of run with it. And I think that as parents, like we need to, be cautious about what information we take in and about what we share with our children, so that we're focusing on things that are scientific and truthful, and and also that we're not getting too stressed out, because that's not healthy, right? That we try to like take care of ourselves, take care of our mental health, just make good choices.
And it's hard to get the right information. So as a scientist, we don't communicate that well with the public. We very complicated ways. We publish in a way that's sometimes not accessible to the public, right? They're locked behind kind of paywalls. And so that makes it really hard, I think, if you're in the general population and you want the facts, because if you look online, you're going to get driven to sites that maybe things aren't accurate. And there are some wonderful sites out there, but you don't always know which one you're clicking on. The news really taking sides, and they've brought politics into it, which makes it even harder, right, to understand the facts. So this is a great forum, right? I think wonderful if you reach out to actual scientists and ask us directly. We can usually give you, right at the front line information. We always have a caveat in there because we're scientists. We don't like saying 100% that something's good or bad or right or wrong. There's that possibility because we think in likelihood. There's a very high chance of something. We've got data to support it, but there's always something that could refute it that comes along later. And so you'll never really have any one of the scientists that you talk to give you a definitive answer, but we will give you as close to that as we can based on what we know from the science.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the best we can do now, right? Is like, not worry too much about things down the road. Like we really can't predict yet what back to school will be like, but at least for the summer, we can, kind of think about ways that we can keep ourselves healthy and, keep our morale up, right? And keep having like good family life and, good work-life balance and things like that. So I think I feel better informed. I feel like I understand the science better. Like in particular, like I wasn't like like you mentioned, like about measles and chickenpox, and that those are diseases that can be spread before the people show symptoms. And like I think I kind of knew that, but the way you explained it really helped me understand it. So so I hope that I hope that the readers have learned from this, and I'm really grateful to you for coming on Charter Moms Chats.
Oh, you're very welcome. I think we have a lot of scientists at Texas Biomed that are happy to do that. And talk to the public. It's so important that we get out and actually share what we know. I hope people are aware of Texas Biomed and what we're doing in the fight, trying to get a vaccine. So that's really important to us to be right at the forefront of that. And, we're all waiting for that vaccine to come out. A while ago. And I think that's where I think the media is misleading. We probably won't have this in a couple of months. And so we have to rely on ways to keep the population safe and, as they say, flatten the curve, have fewer cases, we don't overwhelm our healthcare workers. While we're developing that vaccine, it really can take a year to 18 months. And that's if it's an infection that's easy, right? So an example, one that's been challenging would be HIV. I mean, this has been decades and we still don't have a good vaccine. And so we don't want it to be like that. We have clues from SARS and MERS before that, which are similar viruses that mean that we feel confident we should be able to get a vaccine for this particular virus. But there's this breadth of challenge. Some are easy, quick vaccine design. Yes, it works. Others, it can take a long time. And that really depends on how much that virus changes. Right? The common cold, we don't have a vaccine. It changes every year. The flu, we have to boost every year with a different vaccine because it keeps changing. So this virus seems to stay the same, and that helps us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good. Yeah. There's so many elements to this. Yes. So let's hope that some of these vaccines are successful, and it's really exciting that here in San Antonio that the research that you all is doing, will help us find out, which vaccines are effective and safe, and hopefully, make it speed up the process of getting those out to real people to prevent infection.
Yeah, that's what we need. And it's great for us to highlight infectious disease. I think, San Antonio is a relatively healthy city. I think we forget that there's lots of infections around when we look globally. We have malaria, TB, HIV. Really, I mean, those are pandemics, but we don't use them. We don't think about them in the same way as this one. We think about this as a pandemic because it's impacting us directly. But we have lots of global pandemics ongoing. And we work, but they don't always they're not something that personally affects us. Now we're starting to know people that have had COVID-19, and we don't necessarily know someone that's got malaria, but around the world experiencing those pandemics in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, we have Becca says, please come back in a couple months.
Yes,
absolutely. I hope you will, Dr. D. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Yeah.
Quite happy to come back again. I know that Texas Biomed are always happy to reach out and talk to the public. It's fun for us too. It's different for us. We're normally in labs, being lab rats, and so it's nice to have a chat with people about what we know and what we do. Yeah.
And I want to thank April Dixon for making the connection. So that, because I didn't know anybody at Texas Biomed, but April made the introduction, and I'm really, really grateful. So this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to spread this link all over the place. So hopefully, more families can learn and feel proud about the work that's happening in San Antonio at Texas Biomed.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, we work across lots of institutes as well. So I would be remiss if I didn't some of our colleagues. So Texas Biomed, we certainly do a lot of non-human primate work, and we do a lot of infectious disease work. And then we work really closely with UTSA and UT Health and SWRI, Southwest Research Institute. And those 4 institutes, really we have access to some local funding where we work together. The vaccines that we're currently working on in San Antonio have been across all those 4 institutes, getting funded through citywide initiatives. And so we're much bigger than Texas Biomed. I love when people do. When we're open again, you know, we do tours and people can come and visit us on campus and really see us in person working. But we actually have this much greater community of scientists in San Antonio, and they work really well together. So we don't really compete with each other. We're working on ways that we can bring the strengths of the 4 institutes together and then do something really, really great. And that's quite a unique thing in most cities that we see that happening. So we love working with our partners as well.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's an important thing for in San Antonio. We can be proud of. San Antonio is a high-tech city. It's just it's more in the biomedical area than it's not so much like computers or things like that. Right? There's some of that too, but but something for San Antonio to be proud of, right? Where we're showing leadership.
We have really good citywide support for science. I love that about the San Antonio community. I think they understand the need to do research. They understand the need sometimes to do animal research because that's a difficult topic for some people. But right now, when we're for a vaccine against something causing a pandemic in the US, I think it's easier for people to understand why we need that. And going out and talking to individuals about why we need that is really, really important.
Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to when things open up again. I want to come take the tour and see the scientists at work. So in the meantime, we'll stick with Zoom calls. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Turner. And I'll be in touch with Lisa. Maybe we can bring you back in July and just see what new discoveries that you all have made.
Very happy to do so.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.